A lot of photographers ask how I keep my high ISO wildlife images looking clean, especially in low light. The truth is, the quality of your starting RAW file matters more than most people realize, and that's why DxO PureRAW 5 has become an important part of my workflow. In this video, I'll show you exactly how I use it before any editing in Lightroom is done, and why the improvements to noise and detail are worth paying attention to. I'll also show you a comparison against Lightroom denoise. With the Black Friday sale right now, it's also a good moment to look at PureRAW if you've been on the fence. Add this code at checkout and you'll save 27%. Once I've imported my image into Lightroom, the first thing I do is immediately send the file to DxO PureRAW 5. Inside the DxO interface, I'm going to zoom into 100% so I can see the details up close. And if you see on the left, we've got the RAW file as it is. And on the right-hand side are the results. So you can see as I drag this slider back and forth, you can see there is all the noise in the image, and there is the results DxO will apply to the RAW file. Now, to get started with, I'm using Prime 3 here. That is the latest denoising and demosaicing model there is, and I like the results above all of the other ones. So for this image, it was shot at ISO 12800, and I think a luminance value of around 40 will do fine for this image. Force details, I'm going to leave that at 0. What that does, it just tries to enhance some of the detail that the denoising has taken away. Under lens sharpness optimization, I normally set this to about standard when it's a very high ISO image, but for this example, I'm actually going to turn this off because I want to compare how Lightroom AI denoise looks compared to this result through DxO. And because the AI denoise in Lightroom doesn't add any sharpening, I'm not going to add any sharpening here. But you can see if I add lens sharpness optimization, it does give the image a slight bump in sharpness, which I really like. And then I'm going to just remove chromatic aberration. Lightroom and DxO basically do the same thing here, but I'd like to just run this chromatic aberration through DxO, and I'm not going to turn off any vignetting or lens distortion. I'm going to click process now, and what this is going to do is run the RAW file through DxO's algorithm, and it's going to give me a DNG file at the end that I can use to edit inside of Lightroom. My DNG file is now in Lightroom, and because this image was slightly underexposed, I'm just going to increase it by 1 stop. And what I want to do now is go back to my original RAW file, and I'm going to run this through the Lightroom Denoise AI. Just going to increase my exposure by 1 stop as well. So we're comparing apples with apples. Going to click Denoise here and let that run. So this is now where Lightroom takes a lot of time, and this example is going to take 40 seconds to run this denoise. And I think this is where Lightroom falls a bit short. It's creating more data inside your previews file, and I think through this denoise is perhaps creating another DNG file hidden in there somewhere. So that's why it does take a bit of time, but I actually prefer the workflow through DxO because it creates that new DNG file. You know exactly where that new DNG file is going, and I think it just speeds up the process as well. And as a personal preference, I do prefer having that DNG file rather than applying this denoise here. Also, if you batch processing a lot of images, DxO does it way quicker, and the workflow is way better, in my opinion, than this denoise through Lightroom here. So we've now waited 40 seconds, and we've got our result here. Let's zoom in to 100%, and we can see there it's cleaned up the image pretty well. But let's have a look at how it compares to DxO's version here. As you can see, the original RAW file is on the left. This is Lightroom's version. And on the right-hand side, we've got DxO's version here. So one area I feel like DxO is far better. If you look on top of the hyena's head here, you can see real nice fine detail. On the left-hand side, it almost looks artificial. It almost looks AI generated. Let's compare a little bit further down here. If you look at the hyena's neck on the right-hand side on the DxO version, to the left-hand side, it looks a little bit softer and almost a little bit more artificial than it does in the DxO file there. Again, the results are quite similar, although I do prefer the DxO detail. It just looks a lot better and more realistic. So in a nutshell, I do find the Lightroom to work pretty well. I just prefer the results from DxO because the details just look a whole lot better. Having said all of that, let's quickly process this image and make it look a little bit better. Let's add a little bit more exposure, maybe about 1.3. I'm going to increase my blacks here slightly and maybe increase the whites just to bring those whites details very close to clipping, just so I'm adding in some real nice brightness in those highlights there. I'm going to drop down my white balance and perhaps a little bit of this tint, like that. And maybe just decrease some of those highlights slightly and bring in a little bit more exposure, mainly to increase the exposure on the body of the hyena here. Let's perhaps just warm that up very slightly, like that. I might add a little bit of clarity. And what I might do now is just add a linear gradient to the bottom of the frame, just to darken that down. Let's have a look at some sharpening. Sharpening is very important after you have denoised an image. And in this example, I'm just going to add a small amount of sharpening, maybe a radius of about 1. I don't want the sharpening to be extremely fine. Detail, I'm going to leave that at 0. And then I'm just going to add my masking around about there. If you're starting with stronger files, the next step is knowing which Lightroom editing techniques actually make the biggest difference. In this next video, I'll show you the 7 I rely on every day.